What's up, everyone? Welcome to our Facebook and now YouTube Live. We have some good questions for you guys today. We get some great questions in the office, and we thought that it would help to share them with you guys. So let's go ahead and jump right in. Jennifer, what do we have for today?
All right, so our top 3 questions for the week. Starting off with question number 1. This is from a mom who's getting frustrated, and that's part of the reason why she came to see us, actually, is what's up with my kids' outbursts or tantrums? Is it normal? Is it something that I have to be worried about? Or do I need to see someone for these outbursts?
Yeah, this is a great question, and probably more than we're able to go into dramatic detail on this Facebook Live, but definitely, there's some part of emotional outbursts, and it really depends on the age as well. But there's certain part of a child becoming really emotional or having these outbursts that is normal. Their executive function, the development of their prefrontal cortex doesn't really start to happen until they're 3 years old. So when they're before that, everyone thinks that a 2-year-old is being manipulative or a 1-year-old is being manipulative. They don't really have the ability to do that. Although it may seem that way, what they're really doing is it's their way of, it's a reflexive action of them trying to get a certain need met. And then as they get older, children can become a little bit more manipulative. And so some of these outbursts, though, are completely normal for a child to be having that. And some of it, though, or what we find is a lot of it can at least partially be due to an unhealthy sympathetic versus parasympathetic response in the body. And so if we look at what the sympathetic nerve system does, your sympathetic nerve system is fight or flight. That's what keeps your body in a constant state of stress, cortisol through the roof, adrenaline through the roof. It also shuts down your executive functions in your brain. And so we've all been there as adults where we get emotional, and when we get scared and we don't know how to express those things. And so when a child is in that sympathetic state or that sympathetic dominance, it's very difficult for them to control their emotions, and they don't even realize that they're doing that. Their body is ramped up. They have what we call a noisy brain due to what's known as disafferentation. So an abnormal neurological input going into the body, causing the brain to be noisy and all over the place. And then there's that reflexive reaction where they're in that constant state of sympathetic dominance, where they're not able to self-soothe or to calm themselves down, or even not even self-soothe. They're not even able to be soothed by anybody. And a lot of the times we try to do that from outside in. So is there a time for medication in certain cases? Yes. Is there a time is counseling important? Absolutely. Also, what's really, really important, though, is balancing out this child's nerve system so they're not stuck in this sympathetic state. It's almost like if you're in your house and the volume on your stereo is cranked all the way up to where it's giving you a headache. You can't even hear what's being said. You can't talk to anybody else. That's the kind of noisy brain that happens when we have this abnormal neurological input into the nervous system. So where does this come from? It comes from subluxation. So when there is an abnormal alignment in the spine, you have abnormal movement in the spine, abnormal neurobiomechanics, which causes aberrant or abnormal neurological input into the brain, causing a disruption, and then they're not able to process things the right way. So what we do, at least from a chiropractic perspective, is we analyze these little spines very specifically. And the biggest input that we see is staying in the parasympathetic zone, so down in the pelvis and sacrum and right up in the upper cervical spine. And it has a really powerful influence on the vagus nerve, which is one of the main parasympathetic nerves in the body. It's cranial nerve. It exits from the skull, runs in the carotid sheath along with the spinal accessory nerve right behind the spine. And if there is abnormal neurobiomechanics in that upper cervical spine, it's not going to activate that vagus nerve and activate that parasympathetic nerve system the way that it's supposed to. So adjustments, what we see every single day in our office when we adjust these little kids is their bodies calm down, their brains calm down, their nerve system calms down. They're able to sleep better. They're able to digest their food better. They're able to focus better. And they don't have those same kind of outbursts because their parasympathetic nerve system and their sympathetic nerve system is in balance, and their brains are not nearly as noisy as they were before.
Yeah, that completely makes sense, especially when you explain how like it's so much noise and so much going on in a child's brain that they couldn't express themselves, and the only way they have an outlet for that is for them to go in through this outbursts and tantrums. So that totally makes sense. I also have though a question. So a parent asked me about this actually. So what should they do first? Should they see a behavioral therapist, or should they see a chiropractor first to get a child assessed for this, or should they do both at the same time?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think if there is an option, both at the same time would be really powerful. We're working on two different ends. We're working from, the spine nerve system into the brain, and then talking to somebody. I mean, everybody should have a therapist, adults, kids, everybody. And so if they're having a difficult time processing this types of information, a therapist would be an incredible combination along with chiropractic care. Like people always ask, what's better? Should I eat healthy or should I exercise? Both. Like you need both of them. So if your child is really going through a difficult time, chiropractic care, incredibly powerful. So is counseling, incredibly powerful. Now, one of my recommendations for parents would be, let's say you have to choose one or the other. I think that eventually both need to be done. But my focus would be, let's try to calm the nerve system down from a structural neurological perspective. And then they'll be able to process the information when they go see a therapist or talk to somebody. They can process that information at a much deeper level. They don't have that baseline noisiness in their brain going, and they're able to process things at a deeper level. But I think both of them are really important.
Yeah, makes sense. All right. Now I know how to answer a patient when they ask that next time. All right, moving on. Our next question for the week. These are most for everyone actually, especially now that we actually, you and I, we put electrolytes into our water. But I actually got a question the other day, like how much water is too much water, and how much should I be drinking anyway every day? Because if you Google it, you get like different answers about how much water should we be having every day.
Yeah, that's why I have my I was drinking during the question. I didn't know if you caught that. Yeah, when it comes to drinking water, unfortunately, we have these two extremes. So there's a saying in endocrinology, if a little bit of a hormone is good, a lot of it is bad. And a lot of people think that the more you have, the better. So I remember when I was in college, I would walk around with these gallon water bottles, and you would just, I don't know why we thought it was good for us, but you would just drink as much of it as you possibly could in a day. And you thought if you could get in at least 1 to 2 gallons a day, like you were of just plain water, that you were in good shape. And here's the problem with that. I want to talk about the extreme. I know you asked about not enough water, but if let's say you have too much water, that is a thing. You can have too much water, especially if you don't have the electrolytes in it. What happens is if you're just drinking plain water and you overhydrate, you get what's known as hyponatremia, which is where you don't have enough sodium in your system. Your body is flushed out of sodium and there's just too much water. And people have died from that before. And so you don't want to just drink as much water as you possibly can indiscriminately. Now, a lot of people don't have that issue. Those are people on that one extreme. The majority of what people suffer from is from dehydration, where they're not consuming enough water. They go a whole day where, they're not eating any fruits or vegetables, which you get water from, and they're not drinking enough water. They get caught up, they get busy, they end up drinking 1 glass of water the whole day. And so if you look at the data ranges, they say anywhere from a half an ounce to an ounce per pound of body weight. Or if you're our friends over in Europe and Asia, 1 ounce to 2 ounces per kilogram of body weight. But what I would highly encourage people to do is to make sure that you add electrolytes in your water when you're drinking it. Now, one of the ways that you can know if you're dehydrated is if when you pee, you don't want your urine to be perfectly clear. That means that you're drinking too much water, or you're in the process of having hyponatremia. You also don't want your pee to be dark yellow or orange. Then that means you're significantly dehydrated. The one thing that will change this a little bit is if you're taking a multivitamin or a B complex, that has a tendency to make your pee bright yellow. So just take that into consideration. And so definitely looking at 1 ounce per, half an ounce to 1 ounce per pound of body weight, but adding some electrolytes in there. One of our favorite companies that do electrolytes is a company called Element, LMNT. And so we have those in the office for people, but you can also make your own mixture. Just if you have a really good salt, like a Redmond's real salt or a Celtic salt, you just add a little bit of salt. Anytime you drink water, you add a sprinkle of the salt in, and you can add a little bit of magnesium and potassium salt in there as well. And you can make your own electrolyte mix as well. Just do some research. RobWolf.com, I think, has some of that on there about how you can make your own electrolyte mixes. But make sure you're drinking enough, because most of you are not. Most of you are not in the category where you're drinking too much.
That's actually me. I find that I don't drink a lot of water, and what I do now is I have a reminder on my phone to
that's a great idea.
Remind me every 5 minutes or 10 minutes to take a sip of water. And of course, it's easier now that we've been putting Element on our water, because it makes it more enjoyable to drink, and it's not just plain water. So that was really helpful.
Yeah, you just don't want to add any sugar to your water, but if you need to add a little bit of flavoring, a little bit of a natural flavoring to your water, then that can really be helpful to get the water into your system if you really just don't like the plain stuff.
All right, cool. Moving on, our last question for the week is from a patient who had knee issues before. And we've actually we've addressed his knee issues already. But the question was, how do I fix my knees? What's wrong with it? Do I need to see a specialist for it? Just how do I fix it so it doesn't hurt?
Yeah, most of the time, most people, and this is where healthcare has gotten this wrong for many, many years. Most people think that people have knee pain because of too much movement. Most of the time, people have knee pain because of too little movement. So you have something that's called where you have overuse degeneration, but you also have something that's known as disuse degeneration or disuse atrophy, that if you don't use it, you lose it. And so if you're not bringing your knees through full ranges of movement, your knees are going to break down. So that old school of thought that when you do a squat, you should never drop down past parallel. Parallel and back up is actually the most stress on the knees. It's actually less stress if you go past parallel and back up, because you start to engage your hamstrings as well. And it's not just your quads that you're using. And so number one, you want to make sure that you're bringing your knees through full ranges of movement. The next thing is you want to make sure that you have the right mobility in your hip and your ankle. So when I find a lot of people that are suffering from knee issues, it's not the knee. Many times it's the hip as well as the ankle. So if you correct the hip and the ankle and get the right mobility and the right activation in those places, that creates a lot better stability for the knee. And then the last thing is you want to make sure that you train your knee in full ranges of movement. So yes, you do want to train in a linear plane. So doing like lunges and squats and deadlifts, those are great. But you also want to do something called skier squats or skier lunges, curtsy lunges. You want to do, there's ones in this program called gymnastic bodies where you're actually pressing your knees together. So your knees are pointed in and you're squatting down with just body weight. And then there's another one where you're practice sitting on the ground. I want you guys to try this. Sit on the ground cross-legged and then try to stand up without using your hands at all. If you can do that, you're in good shape. If you can't do that, you are on the path for knee problems later on. So those are the exercises to do, but then also making sure, obviously from a chiropractic perspective, the low back, the pelvis, the hips need to be aligned properly to create the right biomechanics downstream through the knees, the feet, and the ankles. So it's a lot bigger of a conversation for us to have around this, but I hope that this at least give you guys a little bit of direction. And as always, put comments below, reach out to us, and we would be more than happy to answer any questions you have.
And also, if you have questions that you would like us to discuss for our next session next week, Monday, just message us, leave a comment on this. If you're watching this later on replay, don't hesitate to reach out to us and we'll be here for you.
See you guys. Have a great week.